Good evening and welcome to the November 2023 Board of Zoning Appeals. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First items on our agenda tonight are prayer and pledge of allegiance. If you will, please stand with me while we go down those. Bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to take the town's business, Lord. We ask that you be with the proceedings here, that everything that would be said and done would be pleasing in your sight. We ask that you continue to bless this town, bless our state, and bless our country, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Scott. Item number 3 on our agenda is citizens' comments. Mitch, any at this time?
None at this time.
All right. Our item number 4 will be approval of the minutes from the October 2023 meeting. Those minutes are in your packets and should be ready to go. Any adjustments or corrections?
No.
Yeah, not seeing any. Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
A second.
And a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? None. Item number 5 is new business. We have 4 setback variances on the agenda tonight, and we'll start with Moises Castillo, Blue Springs Drive.
Yep. This is a first of the 4 front setback variances. A front setback variance request of 20 feet and a side setback variance request of 2 feet to allow a carport within that front setback. The applicant requested, once again, a 20-foot front setback variance to place a detached carport in the front setback of the principal structure. In addition, a side setback variance of 2 feet is being requested. The property is zoned R3 and is 10,200 square feet in size. The minimum front yard setback requirements within this district is 35 feet for any structure. When the plat was recorded back in 1993, a 40-foot front setback was required at that time. So based on that, it's noted on the plat, any structure is now required to meet 40 feet for any structure, not that 35 as would be today. Detached structures are allowed with a minimum of 8 feet from the side property line, with the exception of any easements present on the property. The structure is 20 by 20 in size, which would be 400 square feet, and is located in the driveway in front of the residence. The applicant has a fenced-in rear yard with an existing shed in addition to the carport. Section 7.080D of the zoning ordinance detail the requirements of variances not involving special flood hazard areas, and they are detailed below. Section 7.080 of the municipal zoning ordinance lists general requirements for a zoning variance request. Those requirements, the staff findings are as follows. The particular physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved that would result in a particular hardship upon the owner as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict application of the ordinance were carried out must be stated. Staff finds that the property is uniform in shape, size, and topographic conditions with no unique circumstances. The conditions upon which the petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same district. The property has no distinguishable features that would deem the petition for a variance. However, the recorded setback for the property is 40 feet compared to 35 if the plat was recorded today. The variance will not authorize activities in a zoned district other than those permitted by this ordinance. Detached structures are allowed by right within the R3 zoning district or are to adhere to applicable front setbacks of the principal structure. Financial returns shall not be considered as a basis for granting the variance. The property owner has not identified financial returns as a reason for this request. The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property after the effective date of this ordinance. The creation of the house and lot shape were not completed by the applicant. However, the structure was placed by the applicant without a building permit. That granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Staff finds that the variance requested could potentially provide the applicant with special privilege denied by the ordinance to other lands, structures, or building in the R3 district with the structure located within the front yard setback. The variance is the minimum that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Staff finds that the requested setback variance may be the minimum to make the reasonable use of this structure for the proposed use due to the structure already being located on the site. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property improvements in the area. Staff finds that the variance should not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the area. The proposed variance will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, substantially increase the congestion in public streets, increase the danger of fire, endanger public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values. Staff finds that the variance may not have any of the above effects. Number 10 is not applicable in this case. In conclusion, staff finds that this property is uniform in size and shape to other lots within the R3 district. No building permits were applied for with the structure and could have been noticed prior to installation of the carport. If approved, the applicant will be required to obtain a building permit for the structure. So this is pictures that were taken today at the site. So looking from the front at the driveway, you can see the carport structure right here in front of the driveway, in front of the garage. Taken from the side angle looking at it, and then there's another overhead image looking at the site, so you can see when this image was taken, the carport was already in place right here in the driveway in front of the house. That's all I got.
All right. Any comments or questions for Mitch? I've got maybe one, Mitch. The carport itself is 400 square feet. Do you know the size of that building in the back?
I don't know the size. It may be a 10 by 10, but it's going to be.
It's still under the
they're
600
gonna be
square
fine on
foot.
square footage
Okay.
for detached structures.
Okay, and I'm looking at the letter that was provided by Mr. Castillo. Did he cite a specific hardship, or was there any hardship referenced?
No, it's very uniform.
Okay, I didn't think so. I was trying to, usually these include, this is the reason why,
Yeah.
and I didn't see any of that, so, okay. All right, any other questions? If not, I will close the Board of Zoning Appeals and open a public hearing for anyone who would like to speak for or against this request. Anyone? Not seeing anyone, we will close the public hearing and go back to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So a couple of things, in my opinion. We generally have been very strict on the front setback enforcement. There's a reason for that. There doesn't appear to be a specific difficulty or hardship identified. And there are at least two areas, number 6, that the staff finds the variance requested could potentially provide the applicant with special privileges denied by the ordinance. And of course, that the structure was placed by the applicant. So I'm not seeing any specific hardship here.
I'm not either.
Agreed, and we've been pretty consistent
Yeah.
on these exact requests.
Do we have a motion or an idea?
We'll make a motion to deny based on the lack of hardship with the property.
All right, we have a motion to deny the request based on lack of hardship. Do
I'll
we have a
second.
second?
I'll second.
As a point of discussion, the board may want to consider a time within which the structure should be removed if the variance request were to be denied.
Okay. Should we vote on the request first and then maybe discuss that, or do we need to make that part of our motion?
You could candidly, you could do either. So it'd probably just be easier to, well, it's already been seconded. So what you could do is just vote to deny, or excuse, pardon me. You would
Vote to
decline to approve the motion and then submit a new motion. And that would include the timeframe within which it needs to be.
We could also modify the existing motion, couldn't we?
Not after a second.
Okay. All right. So the motion that we have is denial of the request, but with no specific timeframe. We have a motion and a second, so we're going to vote on that one first. All those in favor of denial with no specific time constraints, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye, so it fails. So now we'll entertain a second motion, and I think this time we would want to include a time constraint. I would think 30 days would be sufficient.
And seeing with no input from the applicant,
Yeah,
I think that's reasonable.
yeah.
Okay.
So I will make a motion to deny the setback variance based on lack of hardship and request that the homeowners have the structure removed within 30 days.
Are you wanting to make that a requirement?
A requirement.
Okay.
All right, so we have a
To remove in
motion.
30 days.
Yeah, so we have a motion for denial with a requirement that it be removed within 30 days. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Now, all those in favor of that request of denial, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved, denied, with the requirement that it's removed in 30 days. The next item on our setback variance is Michael Crawford with 407 Morton Lane.
Yeah, so this is another setback variance request. It's for 32 foot for the front setback variance to place a fence within the front setback in front of the principal structure. Property is zoned R2, low density residential, and it's approximately 18,312 square feet in size. Minimum front yard setback requirements within the R2 district is 35 feet for any structure. When the subdivision plat was recorded for this property in 1964, setback requirement was 40 feet, much like the last request. If approved, the structure would be roughly 25 feet from the edge of pavement on Morton Street. The applicant did apply for a fence permit. As part of the application process, applicants are provided an agreement for fence accessory structure form, which outlines the requirements for fences and accessory structures per the zoning ordinance. The applicant is advised of presence of any easements on their property. This lot does not have any easements on it. A drawing was also submitted for the proposed location of the fence, which was not required as part of the application process. Upon receiving the agreement form for fences, the applicant took this as approval for the location and the fence was then constructed. Section 7.080D of the zoning ordinance detail requirements for variances not involving special flood hazard areas, and they are detailed below. Section 7.080 of the municipal zoning ordinance lists general requirements for a zoning variance request. Those requirements and staff findings are as follows. The board shall not grant a variance unless it makes finding based upon evidence presented as follows. The particular physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved that would result in a particular hardship upon the owner as distinguished from mere inconvenience if the strict application of the ordinance were carried out must be stated. Staff finds that the property is uniform in shape and size and topographic conditions with no unique circumstances. The conditions upon which the petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property in the same district. The property has no distinguishable features that would deem the petition for a variance. However, the recorded setback for this property is 40 feet compared to 35 feet if the plat is recorded today. The variance will not authorize activities in a zone district other than those permitted by the ordinance. Fences are allowed within the R2 district, but are to adhere to all applicable provisions of section 3.180 of the zoning ordinance. Financial returns only shall not be considered as a basis for granting the variance. The property owner has not identified financial returns as a reason for this request. The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property after the effective date of this ordinance. The placement of the fence was completed by the applicant. That granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that was denied by this ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Staff finds that the variance requested could potentially provide the applicant a special privilege denied by the ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the R2 district with a fence located within the front yard setback. The variance is the minimum that will make the possible reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Staff finds that the requested setback variance may not be the minimum to make the reasonable use of the structure for the proposed use. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the area. Staff finds that the variance should not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the area. The proposed variance will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, substantially increase congestion in public streets, increase the danger of fire, endanger public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values. Staff finds that the variance may not have any of the above effects. Number 10 is not applicable in this case. In conclusion, staff finds that this property does not have unique circumstances in regards to physical attributes associated with the lot. The applicant contacted staff with a fence permit application including a drawing of the desired fence location. A drawing is not required as part of the application process. However, the applicant was not notified the desired location would not meet setback requirements. Upon receiving a signed agreement for the fence accessory structure form back from staff that recognized the applicant was notified if any easements are present on the lot, the applicant took that as approval for the location and constructed the fence in the desired location. I will add to this, when signs were put out this week for these properties, I did receive a couple calls about this fence, and essentially they're all from surrounding property owners saying they had no issues with it. Once I told them what the request was for, they were all okay with what the request was being presented to us tonight. So I just want to get that input. This is the fence out at the property, looking at it from street frontage. And then this is the fence on the other side of the property. So you can see there is also a gate here for the ability for the applicant to get in and out of the property. It's nothing that I believe is motorized. I think it's just a simple latch in there that the applicant can move back and forth at their desire. So this is an approximate location taken based on measurements provided on that said drawing the applicant provided, just to give an approximate location. It's not accurate, just a rough given overhead view of where that fence may be located on the property. That's all I got.
Okay. So let me ask one question. I'm a little confused. At the beginning of your staff report, you said that they're requesting a 32-foot setback or variance.
Yep.
But you also said that if where the fence is 25 feet from the road. So
This is because of where the right-of-way line is located. And
So
the right-of-way line is deeming, that's the measure where we start the.
is
variance
that
from.
like the center of the road or somewhere beyond the edge of the pavement?
Yeah, so on this picture up here, you can see where these black lines, this black line is the property line. So everything from here over to the other side of the road is deemed right-of-way, owned, managed by the town. So for that reason, from this black line right here is back towards the houses where we start that setback from.
And so from that black line, it's supposed to be 35 feet to the front.
40 feet. Because it was an older plat recorded, and
Right,
40 foot
it's
was
35
recorded.
today, 40 in this plat, but, okay. So essentially what you're saying is that is 7 or 8 feet from that black line,
Give or
which is
take.
why it's a 32-foot exception or variance, okay. Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, at this time, we will suspend the Board of Zoning Appeals and open a public hearing for anyone who would like to speak for or against this request. If you will, step to the podium, state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name's Mike Crawford. I do live at 407 Morton Street. I just want to say that everything I've done on that property, I've gone through the codes department, okay? And, you know, my carport or my swimming pool, things like that, and I've had issues with both trying to get them to meet the codes requirement, and we worked through those. And I filled out the application for the fence, and when I filled it out, this typical page here, I have copies of this if y'all don't have this, but this typical page here that you
That's
get
what's in our
off.
packet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have it in our packet.
Okay, so when you get this page here off the internet, it doesn't say anything about the code violation of what your setback should be. Okay, there's 2 pages that comes with it, and the second page is, you know, like it says, like, when is the application required, and a few things like this. There's about 6 items on here that I thought that I adhered to. Okay, whenever it says, will I receive a fully executed copy of the paperwork, and it says a copy of the signed application and plat will be mailed back and the property owner after completion. Okay, and I did get that back, and then it said no variances. Okay, and it was signed, and then under the comments, there was no comments there that would have alerted me to that I was in violation of such code. And if it was, then you would be, you can have 2 options, right? Not to put the fence up, or you can come to the zoning appeals and try to have it worked out. That was never on there, and this was the drawing. Of course, this is hard to tell here, but the one that I sent, it clearly showed the front of the house, Morton Street, and, you know, where my water meter was, the gas meter, and the gate, and the driveways, okay? And if we knew that I was in violation, it should have been kicked back right there that says, no, you can't put a fence out front of your home because of this particular code, yada, yada, yada. And then we would have went a different route. But when I got that back, and there was nothing of a mention of that, that's when I pulled the trigger to have the fence installed, okay? And I wasn't aware of that particular code until I got the letter in the mail about I was in the violation. And then when I read the violation, you know, there's 4 or 5 different items in there, A, B, C, and D, okay? And you get down to D, that like, well, certain types of fence are allowed to go, a decorative fence is allowed to go to the front of your house. I thought, well, maybe we can throw that route, you know. To me, it's a decorative fence, good-looking fence. Probably the second best looking fence in that neighborhood out of about 8 you drive by, this fence staying around the front. But, you know, I don't know, I surely wouldn't have done this knowing that I'd be in this situation today,
Gotcha.
okay?
So I don't think we have that second page he's talking about that has 6 items that,
The instruction page.
I can,
and then, so he referenced that page, and I'm not familiar with that page, just right off my head.
well, I think whenever, you get it off of the internet.
It's attached or part of the document?
Yes, sir, if you don't mind, I'll
Yeah,
bring that
sure.
up.
The instruction
Okay,
page.
perfect, yeah, we've got this page. I just don't think I have the second page.
Laptop, you can, go on the website.
Yeah, I don't have this
This
page.
one?
Yeah, we don't have,
Yes.
that's good, that one.
Yeah, that, so when it comes, whenever I download that off the internet, that's what I get, that page and
Public
that
Works,
page.
it's on the very front
Okay, and
page.
then when it come back, when that lady signed, that's whenever it kind of, it threw up those codes up there at the front,
Scroll
I'm gonna
down
be
to the
honest with
fifth
you.
Yep.
I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that, because
Okay.
when it said.
Sorry, can you
what
step
it
back
did,
to the
that's-
microphone, just because people listening can't hear you?
Yeah,
Sorry, thank you.
when it came back, it had that other page with it, and it says, you know, no variances or whatever, and I didn't see anything in the comment stage. It's, this portion of it worked a whole lot different than what it would have been if I worked through the codes department trying to get something built there. It's either, you either denied, and the reason why, yada, yada, da, and then we work around it, and then we get things, it can either be fixed or it can't, right? So, and that's what I did a couple times, right? When I put the pool in, I had to pay extra $500 to get an easement on the left side where the subdivision that come in, there was supposed to be a road there, and they told me I had a 40-foot easement from there to my pool. But somebody come in there and bought that subdivision and on the other side, and they built 4 or 5 houses in that cul-de-sac, so that done away with the road, so now I took my easement back to 20 foot, but I had to go pay $500 to get the, you know, the property redone on the plat. So, it's, like I say, I thought I was in the right whenever I drew all that stuff out, and you know, it's,
Yeah,
I don't know,
gotcha.
I would've really thought that when they seen the drawing, that it would've kicked back to me and said, no, you can't because you're violating this violation, yada, yada, da, and then I would've took it to another step,
Yep,
right?
okay. Does anyone else have questions for Mr. Crawford? I appreciate the information you've given us. It's a lot of detail. And I think we had all of this except for this one page, which does raise some questions, which we'll get to. But anything else? Any other comments?
I don't have anything.
I think we're good, Mr. Crawford. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you too, Mitchell.
Anyone else who would like to speak for or against this request before we close the public hearing? Not seeing anyone, we will return to the Board of Zoning Appeals for discussion. There is some language in the agreement that says, which again, I don't really like the terminology of that, but fence cannot encroach on the front yard setback, provided the provisions of Article 2, et cetera. So there is some fine print in this page right here that talks about the front setback, but honestly, there's nowhere else, I don't see that it's mentioned. This page is a little confusing to me because there is some language in here that I think probably is just not incorrect, but it's short-sighted. Item number 3 talks about a fence being no closer than 8 feet from the property line. That's only if it's on the side. I think that needs to be modified to include more language than just that, right? It's not 8 feet from property line on all 4 sides. It's only if that was a side or a back. So it's not really addressing front fences. This page really isn't addressing front fences. And I think that's probably where some of the confusion is coming from, because we've had a couple of these come in that, and I understand you guys have started working on changing some processes and stuff to try to keep the confusion down, but I think that's definitely causing confusion because this piece of paper is really written for a fence that's going in the back. And this is not the case in this particular request. So I think that's where the confusion is. Me knowing that there's 8 foot on the back and 5 foot across the back, 8 foot on the sides. When I read that, I know exactly what they're saying, but it wouldn't make sense to the public. We have had a couple of these kind of requests come in, fences in the front yard. We just had the carport in the front yard, and we have consistently denied those because we try to protect that front setback. I guess the comment about decorative fencing that Mr. Crawford added, do you have that detail? What does the ordinance say about that?
I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago now when we revised the zoning ordinance to give some additional details as far as what a decorative fence is. We had a definition for decorative fence which says a fence constructed of wood, wrought iron, vinyl, or brick so that is no more than 3 feet tall. And then I had another item in the report that pointed to section 3.180 of the zoning ordinance, which outlines fence requirements. There's several items in that which state it cannot be put in the front yard, essentially. And if you do put it in the front yard, it's allowed on the sides, but no more than 10 feet total, broken up into 5-foot segments. So,
Now, I assume this fence is taller than 3 foot.
Mr. Crawford probably better give an idea, but I believe it is over 3 feet.
48
Since I've
inches.
got 48 written in here.
This one's tough.
If I could ask very briefly, since the public hearing was closed, and Mr. Crawford is off, sort of in the galley, can you sort of restate what he said about the height of the fence? And that's where you're getting that understanding?
Yeah, he stated that the height of the fence is 48 inches, and specifically decorative fence is 36 inches or less, and this one is 48 inches, so that's why
It
it doesn't.
says it in our paperwork.
Yeah, it doesn't specifically quantify as a decorative fence, even though
Correct.
it could be construed that way, because it is somewhat decorative. It's not a bad-looking fence, but
Thank you,
it
Mr. Chairman.
technically doesn't meet the requirement. So, board, you have the same information I do. Normally, if this did not have the drawing and some of the paperwork he's provided, this would be an automatic almost rejection, denial. We've done that consistently with these type of requests, and we would be consistent to do that going forward. You have this case in front of us, so it's kind of, where do we go?
And I'm trying to think, 2 months ago, we had a similar situation
did.
with Indian Springs
We did,
Road with
and I don't
some discrepancies.
I don't remember, was
there.
that a fence?
It was a
Fence,
fence,
for the
and
car
there
lot.
was some hang up there on.
Yeah, and it was very
misinformation
similar.
there.
There was some, he had submitted a permit or gotten a permit, and
Gotten 3 responses.
that's right,
That
that's
were
right.
all-
And he had the emails. I remember that now. Okay,
If memory serves, that request was denied.
yes, it was. Any comments or a motion?
I mean, there's a part that says we need to be consistent on how we
Yep.
do these things.
Yep.
So, based on that, I will make a motion to deny the setback variance in the front yard based on lack of hardship and, yeah.
All right, we have a motion to deny the request for a
Do
variance
we need,
based on the lack of a hardship, which is a strict requirement of the ordinance variance.
I have a question real quick. Jason, do we need to put any kind of time frame
that's what I was
on?
about to ask.
I think that's a worthy discussion, and since the applicant is here, you may wish to have some of his input on that.
So, before we go down that path, let me ask another question. So, without an exception, he would be allowed to put this fence 40 feet from that black line.
Yes.
And
That's-
under current zoning, if it had been today, it would be 35 feet. Do we know how far the house is to the front of that?
You're looking, it's a very small sliver. The house is pretty much up to
So
that
there's not
setback
really
line.
room for that fence to move back and stay in the variance in front of the house.
Nothing usable.
All right, we still have a motion. Do we want to have a conversation? You want to talk to Mr. Crawford again? Do you want to second? What do we want to do? Pleasure of the board.
Well, I think we still need to discuss if we're going to deny and remove the fence, we need to put a time frame on it before we second.
That's the question.
Right, do we, do we discuss that now?
Yep. I'm going to suspend the Board of Zoning Appeals and ask Mr. Crawford to come back to the microphone if he could. So, Mr. Crawford, what we're struggling with is we've had at least 2 other instances that I can think of in the near recent past with a similar issue. Not quite the same, a little different. Honestly, not even, in some cases, as nice of a fence. But those matters were also denied because the ordinance variance requires a hardship. And although information that you got from them is confusing or not completely communicated, it doesn't constitute a hardship that allows approval. And that's kind of the struggle that we're having. So the question is if this motion passes and it's denied, how much time would it take you to move the fence back to where it would not be, a variance wouldn't be required? Move it back far enough to meet your needs. And problem is I'm gonna be honest, the way your fence is set up, it's pretty much from the front of the house forward. And it sounds like you can't even move it back. You'd have a sliver that would be acceptable, so I'm not sure how you would even rearrange it. But
I don't know, it's, so from where my property stake is, I'm assuming that's where that black line is, right?
yeah, that black line,
Approximately.
and
So,
officially, it's
40
gotta
feet.
come back 40 feet from that black line.
Yeah, so that's gonna put me probably somewhere,
I think it's gonna be
probably
probably
somewhere.
closer.
Well,
Yeah, because so you're 25 feet off the pavement now, and the black line is a good 10 feet off the pavement, probably.
Yeah, so
it's like 18 feet from where the edge of the pavement is to where that black line is.
I measured right before we did it.
It's-
It's about 15 feet roughly,
Okay.
but yes, close.
So if the fence is less than, what is it, 42 inches, 3.5 feet?
3 feet.
3 feet. So if I shorten the fence, I can leave it where it is.
No. So let me read this out here, what it states in the ordinance. Decorative fences are allowed to encroach upon a front yard setback. A decorative fence is a fence constructed of wood, wrought iron, vinyl, or brick, which is no more than 3 feet tall. The amount of decorative fence allowed in a front yard is limited to no more than 10 horizontal feet per parcel of land constructed in individual portions not exceeding 5 horizontal feet each. However, no fences or decorative fences allowed to encroach upon the public right of way.
So say that again, 10 feet
10 feet.
horizontal,
10 horizontal feet,
which is extending from the house towards the road, right?
correct.
And then 5, what was the 5 feet part?
Portions not exceeding 5 horizontal feet each. So you have a 5-foot section, you a stake, and then or a post, and then you have another 5-foot section.
So in other words, he could come back to, if he brought his fence back on the sides, he could bring it 5 feet, he could bring it to the 35-foot mark on each side and across if it was 3 foot tall.
No, you still can't. So we're talking 10 feet total.
Max.
Max.
So it's
amount
just, so,
of-
okay.
You can't even
So
close it.
it's not vertical and horizontal, it's just 10 feet linear feet.
Total. Correct.
Well, that's useless.
So that, yeah. doesn't help.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be pointless, but, you know, it's just irritating that, you know, you try to do the right things and you come to the right place and submit paperwork to have stuff like this done, and then you rely on the city officials to provide you with the right information and the feedback of what you need to do or can or can't do. I was never notified on those forms that I submitted that I can't do it. Okay, that fence cost me a lot of money.
Mr. Crawford, could you point to something on the application that gave you the idea that you could do it?
I didn't point to anything that said I could, but it's out of the 6 items or whatever on that second page that it listed that, kind of like sort of the guidelines of the process of how things go. I thought I met all those requirements, and I thought whenever I got the response back and it was signed and dated, and it had on there, no easements, and there was no other comment. And even though the submitted drawing that I put in there, I only did that because I had to do it with all the other code things that I did. I threw that in there to give everybody who was looking at that where this fence was going, okay? Now, if there was question with it, I don't know why they didn't take it over here to the codes department and go, hey, can we do this? They would've got shot down right then. Even the form should say, no fences allowed in the front yard. It doesn't.
Yeah, it just provides the reference to the zoning ordinance in
Yeah,
the
it-
part that's signed, it provides that, so that's the way in which it does that. And so it's just refers you to the zoning.
Yeah, I
And
think-
whether or not that's, you
Yeah,
know,
I
the best
think
way to
the-
do it or what have you, right? That's kind of how that
Yeah.
works.
Right, but whenever, the
They're-
first two
they're-
pages though that you download off the internet doesn't have that zoning ordinance in it.
That's true. You got that back. Yeah, that's right.
Right, but
Went through
when it come
signature.
back, then all it said was no variances and it was signed and no other comment. Yeah, it's probably foolish on my part, didn't read the fine, writing on there, but it's any other time that I've dealt with the city on getting things, to go through the approval process, I mean, they tell you, you're denied, and here's why.
Yeah.
Not the way it's kinda left open-ended.
Six line.
And I go out and I spend this type of money on this, and now 6 months later, I gotta tear it down, and it's, I'm having a hard time with that. It's,
Yeah.
trust me, guys, you know, I appreciate everything you guys do, and I'm one for the rules, regulations, and all that, but whenever you submit things to the right people, they should be the ones that tell you if you can do it or not, right? When you submit the type of stuff that I submitted, okay? I don't know what else to say, but it's,
Yeah, I think, you know, where I'm going is, I think there's two things, that there's a difference between a setback and an easement. And I know that probably doesn't make any sense to you, maybe now it does, but at the time, I could see why that sounds like the same thing.
correct.
And
But on
that's
that same
kind of what
point-
the application is really about, easements, and not
Correct.
really about the setback, right? And the easements are drainage easements or, you know, specific right-of-ways that have to be left alone. And I think that's where the confusion is the application that was signed and sent back is specifically talking about easements and not setbacks. And it even says in there, 6th line down, no encroachment on the front setback is allowed. I get it, it's small print, it's fine, and maybe we should highlight that more or something, I don't know, but
Well, yeah, but
that's the
it's-
confusing part.
Right, but I thought that when that thing come back, it would've said denied due to your approachment line, right? And if you wish to appeal this, come to the Board of Zoning Appeals, right? There was
Yeah, I think,
nothing.
I think this page needs to be modified as well. You've been talking about, because, I mean, the question number 4, are there any other approvals required? It makes it sound like there's no other conversations that need to be had. And I can see why that's confusing. But, I mean, it's, unfortunately, this still fits the exact same situation we had before.
2 months ago.
And that's the problem, is that this has happened multiple times now, and we've been consistent. Anything else for Mr. Crawford? We still haven't had a timeline. If it's denied, how much time do you need or want to take it down?
I don't know, 60 days?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak for the public hearing?
Yeah,
Yeah. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Justin Crawford, 207 Valley Court. You know, I'm sitting here, and I'm here obviously to support my dad, but y'all brought up that this has happened several times now. Where's the accountability?
Yep. Well, to speak to that, so the first time this came through was a couple months ago. We identified the issue, and there's action. We've already corrected some things on this form, and there's actions that's already been taken because it happened. Unfortunately, your dad got his before that one in March.
Right.
So if it had been done since our meeting in August, he would have got a different form and it would have been a different process. So that, you're right, there had been at least 2 or 3 from earlier this year, but all of them are before we identified the problem and corrected the process. And that's the problem we're running with, is it's just timing issue. If this had been a month ago, it would have been a totally different conversation.
Right, and as part of that accountability to me, y'all recognized an issue. corrected it,
Yeah, it's,
but you're still accountable for the past.
but it's not really a fault on the town, it's just, for example, the application you got back, I mean, it clearly does say no structure can encroach on the front setback. It's in there. So, I mean, that's the point. It's small and it probably needs to be highlighted more, but it's still in there. We didn't add something that wasn't already there. The application process is specifically about easements and not setbacks. We recognize that we need to be more clear about how that's communicated. It doesn't change the fact.
Right,
that
and
it's
you
easement
mentioned that a
setback.
few times, and
Yeah.
my question on that was gonna be, is there another form for setbacks? Cause you've said.
I don't know
This
what
just
the,
into,
yeah, I don't know what the
easement,
process
so.
is for how that would have gotten caught. You guys would have to talk about that from a setback perspective. What should Mr. Crawford have done after this to ensure, is there a process? Is there a codes conversation, or is it on him to come ask?
Aside from, I mean, and I don't want to sound patronizing here, but all property owners are responsible to know what the limitations are on their ability to use their property, and so this is part of it. So you kind of have to just know what's going on, and so I don't know what else to tell you there. The town is here to serve as much as possible, right, and want to have great customer service to folks, and obviously we would much rather not have had this result, right? These are things that we want to avoid, right?
Right.
And so, you know, to your point, I think to the extent that we can do things to streamline things, we want to do that. On this is the situation we've got here, for you know, and so he was kind of caught in that. Town employees work, obviously, I know, you probably know a bunch of town employees, they work very hard. Sometimes mistakes happen. It's part of government, you know, so. And anyway, when it comes to this form, though, you wouldn't know necessarily
And
to
it's-
go research the deed records to see where all the easements are. So if that's, for example, that's the thing we're going to tell you.
And
right?
another confusing thing is the
So-
form that he signed is a different form from that one that he got back.
Yeah. That was
Which-
page 1 of 2. Indicated at
that
the
is-
bottom of the form he signed was page 1 of 2. It's the request. And he would need permission to build on an easement because that would be a public easement. And so we
Right,
would have to
right.
give that permission, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of where that is. And then you get this form back that has the notice, hey, there's no easements, and then it's signed. So really there's no permission, no nothing being granted. Except you get this handy notice that says things about fences, requirements about fences. You do get that.
Well, I think we could all agree that that is very, very confusing. If you get assigned something back saying.
Yeah, I
With no
completely,
denial.
I completely
And
agree
I
that it's
understand y'all
confusing.
changed that process. And I will say, since he got the letter, we've looked into it. It's really hard to find this information without coming up here. I mean, we're all.
Referring to setbacks specifically? Hard to-
Setbacks or anything
okay.
on fences. Tonight was the first time I've ever heard the decorative fence rules, other than just a line of could be decorative fence, based on things that are on your website, so.
Yeah, yeah, and there's actually a piece of that Mitch didn't read. It actually, the decorative fence, when I found it somewhere in one of these papers, that's actually for the back. It says on a piece of property that has 2 front setbacks, and then it starts talking about the decorative fence. So it's not even, that's why it's not really allowed in the front yard, because it's really not talking about a front setback where the house faces. It's talking about a front setback that doesn't face the front of the house. And it says that in the ordinance, actually. Which I did not see until after I don't even remember where I found it just a second ago. But that's also kind of a little confusing because it's in the same conversation. So, I'm sorry, what was your first name, Mr. Crawford?
Justin.
Justin.
Yeah,
Any more questions, any further comments, Justin?
no, just that, appreciate all y'all do,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
just wanna challenge that, this is very confusing stuff I'm a homeowner myself. If
Yeah.
I were trying to do this, it'd be a nightmare, so,
Completely agree, understand.
thank you.
Any other public hearing, public speakers? No comments? We'll close the public hearing, reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals. Actually, Mitch, what I was talking about is right here. It says, no encroachment on the front setback is allowed in the case of a lot with multiple road frontages. This would include the front yard setback on which the principal structure faces. On any road frontage which the principal structure does not face, a fence could encroach on the front yard setback, provided the provisions of Article 6, Section 308 are met. Fences and decorative fences are allowed to be located along the property lines in the side and rear yards. In no case shall a fence or decorative fence encroach on a public utility or drainage easement. So it actually talks about the piece of decorative fence you pulled out, it actually talks about before that they're not allowed in the front yard either. So
Yeah.
it's kind of confusing that, because we were talking about a 3-foot fence may be allowed, but it's actually, if you read the whole thing and not take a couple out of context, it wouldn't be allowed either. All right, so we still have a motion that has not been seconded to deny the request. There was no time constraints associated. I don't even remember who made that motion.
Jay.
So Jay, I don't know if you want to modify that motion or we want to let that one die and start a new one. I don't know.
If the motion has not been seconded, you could withdraw, and
So
a
you
new
can
motion
either
can be
withdraw
made.
and make a new one.
I will withdraw my original motion.
Okay. Do you have a second? Another one?
Do I have a second?
We'll keep throwing darts till we get one.
I will, again, make a motion to deny the setback variance due to lack of hardship in the, with the layout of the property, and ask or require the fence to be removed or relocated within 60 days.
All right, we have a motion to deny the request for a setback variance with the requirement that the structure be removed within 60 days due to lack of hardship. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Jason, we got that stated correctly, I think? Yep. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved for denial. And Mr. Crawford, for me, as a town councilman, I apologize for the confusion, but I can assure you, we're gonna try to figure out how to keep these conversations from happening in the future. That's the best I can tell you at this point. And I know it's a little solace, but you've highlighted a situation that I think we all need to try to clarify. Next item on our agenda is setback variance for Jose Manuel Morales, 416 Clarkston Drive.
This is a third setback variance request. It's for 23 feet front setback variance to place a detached storage shed in the front setback along Rock Springs Road. In addition, there is a 3.5-foot side setback variance on the northern property line, so there's some additions that have been made to this report since package went out last week, so just to give you a heads up, there's gonna be couple modifications in this report. The property is zoned R3 and is 10,200 square feet in size. The parcel has road frontage on Clarkson Drive as well as Rock Springs Road, which would traditionally be a rear yard setback for a lot with one front setback. Since this property does have 2 road frontages, the 2 front setbacks are required to be met. Minimum front yard setback requirements in the R3 district is 35 feet for any structure. And once again, this is a old plat, so 40 feet were required at the time that the plat was recorded. The 40 feet setback was shown along Clarkson Drive, but there was no setback shown along Rock Springs Road. Traditionally, some plats today we would see is all the front setback, the minimum building setback lines are shown on the plats. So we would see that this lot would have 2 front setbacks in this instance, but back when it was recorded, only the 1 setback on Clarkson Drive where the driveway is shown was shown. So anytime we have a question as far as whether building is going to meet setbacks or not, we default to what the ordinance requires today if it's not shown on the plat. So today it is 35 feet, so they would have a 40-foot front setback on Clarkson and 35 feet on Rock Springs Road, just for clarification purposes on this. Detached structure, so it is detached from the house, and detached structures are to be a minimum of 8 foot off of any side lot lines. So we have encroachment on that side lot line within that 8-foot requirement as well, which is part of that 3.5-foot request as well, as part of this. The structure is 8 feet by 20 feet in size, which is 160 square feet, and is placed in the backyard. The applicant's backyard is fenced, and the shed is located within the fenced area. The structure has not been permitted and will require to be permitted through the codes department if approved. This is additional onto the report from what was sent out last week. There is also an attached structure that has been recently permitted, which is also encroaching on the front setback on Rock Springs Road. So the applicant did have a deck in the backyard. They did submit a permit to the codes department to cover that structure, and this is a completely separate issue. I just let you know about this additional information as part of this request as well. So this deck is now going to be covered. It was permitted as a covered structure, so it'd be approximately in the vicinity of 27.5 feet from the rear from that property line on Rock Springs Road, which would require about 7.5 feet variance for this instance. That deck in question was permitted per the drawing submitted by the applicant at 20 feet by 11 feet, which is about 220 square feet in size. So once again, that is a completely separate issue from the one that is on your agenda tonight for the detached structure, that shed. But just want to make that known. Section 7.080D of the zoning ordinance, detail requirements for variances not involving special flood hazard areas, and they are detailed below. Section 7.080 of the municipal zoning ordinance lists general requirements for zoning variance request. Those requirements to staff findings are as follows. The board shall not grant a variance unless it makes finding based upon the evidence presented as it follows. The particular physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved that will result in a particular hardship upon the owner as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict application of the ordinance were carried out must be stated. Staff find that the property is uniform in shape and size and doesn't have any unique circumstances in regards to the shape. Conditions upon which the petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property in the same district. As stated earlier, the property does have two front setbacks, one on the traditional front and one in the rear yard, which constricts the rear yard for additional structures since any covered structure cannot be located within that front setback. The lot is 120 feet long at the time of recording. The front setback on Clarkson Drive was 40 feet, with the setback on Rock Springs Road defaulting to the requirement stay of 35 feet. Since it was not denoted on the plat, and this does leave a buildable space on the property for any covered structure to be 45 feet long. The house is approximately 37 feet at its longest, and that does constrict any development in the rear yard to be significantly smaller. So you're essentially left with the distance of that'd be 7 or 8 feet for distance, which would be applicable for any kind of structure really to meet setback requirements at that point. The variance will not authorize activities in a zoned district other than those permitted by this ordinance. Detached structures are allowed by right within the R3 zoning district, but are to adhere to applicable front setbacks of the principal structure. Financial returns shall not be considered as a basis for granting the variance. The property owner has not identified financial returns as a reason for this request. The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property after the effective date of this ordinance. The creation of the house and lot shape were not completed by the applicant. However, the structure was placed by the applicant without obtaining a building permit. The granting of the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Staff finds that the variance requested could potentially provide the applicant with special privileges denied by the ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the R3 district with a structure located in the front yard setback. Other properties in the same zoning district have requested variances from the BZA in previous years in similar situations and have received approval for that instance where they do, in this circumstance, you bought up to two front setbacks and one's on the back instead of the traditional corner lot, two front setbacks. The variance is the minimum that will make possible the reasonable use of the land's building or structure. Staff finds that the requested setback variance may not be the minimum to make the reasonable use of the structure for the proposed use. The structure could be rotated but would still not meet those setback requirements. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property improvements in the area. Staff finds that the variance should not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property improvements in the area. The proposed variance will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, substantially increase the congestion of the public streets, increase danger of fire, endanger public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values. Staff finds that the variance may not have any of the above effects. Number 10 is not applicable in this case. In conclusion, staff finds that the property is uniform in size and shape to other lots within this district. However, the parcel does have 2 front setbacks to meet, one on the front and one on the rear, which creates a constricted rear lot size for detached structures. If approved, staff would be required to obtain a building permit for the structure. The staff would also recommend the board put a condition, if approved, that the shed not be converted to living space. If the applicant wishes to use that shed for living space, they must submit an application to the Board of Zoning Appeals for an accessory apartment at that time. Just due to the way the structure looks, it's a very, very nice shed. It has some resemblance of what could be a living space, so we just want it to be known that if it is converted, that they do present another application to you at that time for it to be converted. On a separate note, the covered deck, just to bring this back into play, the covered deck is approximately 27.5 feet from the property line on Rock Springs Road. Once again, a permit has been applied for that structure and was approved, and construction has started on that. So you'll see that structure in these pictures here. Once again, just a side note added to this, so you have for this original request tonight, we have 2 setback requests. We have the 23-foot along Rock Springs Road for the front setback, and then we have a 3.5-foot side setback along the northern property line. So this is I'm pretty much standing on the property line where this picture was taken. So the sidewalk more or less is where that property line is located for along Rock Springs Road, and you can see that original addition that was permitted. And then right here it's difficult to see, but this shed right here is the development in question for tonight. You can see right here, once again, that shed right here, and then the addition right here. Overhead image shows right here is the approximate location for where that shed is located and placed, and then right here is that existing deck, and then it was either on this side or this side of where that addition is built out from. I believe it's going to be on this side. So basically doubled the width of this deck and then covered it. So
But so that's the existing deck that's on the house. The cover is just covering the deck, right? It's not going further into the yard, or is it?
the applicant probably better speak to that than I can, how much additional, based on what I reviewed from the application submitted for the permit, it looked as though it was just covering what was existing out there today, but
Okay.
the applicant better speak to that. Based on the images, it looks like that's covered and then brought over to cover an additional basic expansion of that deck.
Okay, I'll come back to that. Okay.
And that's a lot of information, but that's what I got on this.
All right, so for the building, if I've got it right, we're looking at a 23-foot variance from the rear front setback
Correct.
and a 6-foot variance,
3.5 foot side.
3.5-foot variance on the side setback.
Correct.
And you mentioned that the other,
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah,
get to the
that's
deck.
Two separate things. Let's keep them
yep,
I'm gonna get
I was
to
gonna
the
make sure they were separate.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
all I was gonna, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, my preference is that we handle them both tonight, but we'll discuss that. All right, any other questions for Mitch? Before we open up public hearing?
Have you had any
No,
calls?
just some generic inquiries on what the sign was about. Really, that's it. Nothing for or against it.
Okay. At this time, I will suspend the Board of Zoning Appeals and open a public hearing for anyone who would like to speak for or against this request. If you would like to speak for it, don't have to, completely your choice. But if you will, state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, so good evening, I'm Jose. I'm the one that, address 416 Clarkson Drive. So I'm the one that put all the hard work to building that shed. I wasn't aware that we needed a building permit for a shed. Our other neighbors have them in their backyard, and we just thought it was a general rule that, hey, you can have it in your backyard. And our backyard, it has a privacy fence on it, so we figured it really wouldn't be, to anyone's concern. But yeah, we wouldn't want it to be denied.
Can I ask you about the deck?
Yeah, so all
the
we're
cover,
doing.
is that covering just the existing deck, or is it gonna encroach
No,
into the
so
yard further?
what we applied for was to extend the deck and then have all that covered.
Extend it which
And not
way?
extend it, but make it
Wider.
wider, not
Side to
wider.
side.
So it's still gonna be
Is it going closer?
11 feet, but I think it's 10 feet, and then we're gonna be 20 feet.
So it's going closer to the fence or not?
No, not at all.
No, so it's going along the back of the house?
Correct.
It's not going
Another
out?
10 feet, basically another square.
Gotcha. Okay. I appreciate, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, we hear exactly what you're saying a lot, and just public service announcement. A permit is required for a building, in the town of Smyrna. If you're gonna build a building, you need to have a permit. But we hear that a lot. So the fact that you didn't know is not new. We've heard that. But I'm just trying to get it out there, just so other people do know that it is required, and not having a permit and a building showing up is usually gonna get you in this meeting. So,
Yeah, so, but I mean, I'm new to it, so.
Yeah,
you know,
understand.
If I knew, we probably
Yeah.
wouldn't be here, so.
Understand. Any other questions for Jose? I did say that right, yeah, Jose, I'm sorry. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else that would like to speak for or against? Not seeing anyone, we'll close the public hearing and reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals. So my question, and the reason I ask about the deck is, I'm a little confused, right? So, and I don't want to confuse two issues, so we'll come back to the building in just a second, but I want to ask this while it's still fresh in my mind. If we don't deal with the patio, is he going to get another code violation saying he's now encroaching on a setback?
I wouldn't view it any differently than what we've already seen tonight. It's another, something maybe been a staff error.
But, so it's possible.
Correct.
Somebody might, okay, and then I guess the next question is, I understand when this neighborhood was built, that rear setback didn't exist. So the deck was probably put on when the house was built or there around, and it wasn't a problem because the setback didn't exist. So by adding a cover to that deck, it now makes it,
Yeah, it's the covered in which sets it apart, and
Okay.
then having it attached to
so
the
even though
house
he's not
also.
encroaching on the footprint really closer to the setback, it still needs a variance.
It's a new structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just, to me, it seemed like he wasn't changing his footprint, and it was the existing footprint, and it should be able to go up, right?
There's
But it's- yeah.
it's multi-level. It's
Gotcha. Okay.
Multiple to this.
So, to summarize now where we are, we have 23-foot setback request for the rear setback, rear front setback, a 3.5-foot side setback for the building. There's also the issue of the deck, which would require a 7.5-foot variance if we so chose, to make it in compliance. And based on what you heard Mitch say is that was permitted and is under construction based on the pictures. You can see he's already building that. So we have these situations quite a bit. I can think of at least two in the last few months where we've approved a similar situation. Scott, you know, we have a mutual friend that has a swimming pool with 2 setbacks.
Yep.
And we approved a variance for that. So I think consistently we have approved rear setback variances for this purpose when there's 2 front setbacks.
Yeah, front setback variance.
You know, the side is a different discussion, you know, there's not really a hardship for why it's that close, but there is a privacy fence, and I think we have given those side variances as well. Sometimes just to make better use of the yard or whatever, right? So, comments, questions, concerns, discussion?
I agree with everything you said. Usually it's not a front and back front. It's usually a front and side
Yeah,
front.
it's usually a corner lot.
Corner
right?
lots,
And-
where we've dealt with
But
this,
we
so
have dealt
that's-
with this a couple of times as well.
Yep.
Well, and if I'm hearing everything correctly, when the lot was originally built, where it's placed wouldn't have necessarily been an issue because.
That's right.
Rock Springs was tiny.
Rock Springs
Right.
has been widened since then.
Since then.
So even
that could
with a
be-
35-foot setback on the old road, it would not have been an issue. It's the issue is the road has widened into its footprint,
Right.
right? It was all right of way, but now that makes it a different setback.
Okay.
And that's part of the confusion. Mitch mentioned maybe staff error. That was part of the confusion. When this was reviewed for the patio, for the deck, the original plat that was filed for this house did not include a rear street setback.
Right,
So when he looked at it, he didn't see a 35-foot setback on the plat.
right.
You know, the hope is that he would have recognized there was a road and thought about that. But again, that's that's somebody just, not really thinking about all of those facets at that moment. It's really not a hard mistake to make, obviously. The plat's not there, it's not in the plat. So, questions, ready? Motion, anybody? If we're gonna,
Specific to the shed.
I think we either do, I think that's probably the best thing, is probably two separate motions if we wanna handle the deck as well. Just so that we don't confuse the situation.
And we're good to do that.
Can we do that?
If the board, given the issue's been raised and is, we're already looking at a setback variance request, I think that's within the board's discretion to take up both issues.
All right, anybody got a motion for one or the other?
We generally have allowed this just because of the hardship created,
That's right,
correct?
by having two front setbacks, yeah. Essentially, you're losing 70 feet of your lot on two different sides,
Exactly.
35 on each side,
Yeah.
right? So that's making the envelope where you can put things much smaller,
Yeah.
and that kind of
Because
limits.
I don't even know that it would
There-
fit
well,
within it in the
he even
front.
said if he turned it to the side,
It
it
wouldn't
wouldn't
fit.
fit.
Yeah.
It wouldn't fit beside the house without a variance, and it couldn't go in front of the house. There's really nowhere on this property he could put that building and not require a variance.
Right,
So we're gonna do one at a time then.
Yep,
okay.
I will make a motion to approve for the shed based on the hardship of having two front setbacks.
all right, so, do we want to include the distances?
Yes.
What is it?
It was a 23 feet on the rear and 3.5 foot on the side.
With the condition of 23 feet on the rear and 3.5 on the side.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion for approval of the variance request for the shed, 23 feet from the rear front setback and 3.5 feet from the side setback. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the variance for the shed has been approved. Now let's discuss the deck. In that case, it would need a 7.5 foot variance to be in compliance.
Is that setback, Mitch, any different
What?
with a deck versus a building? Like,
Essentially, when he covers it, it's like it's a building,
Yeah, and it's
right?
attached to the house, yes. If it were detached, we have a different story. It's similar to the shed.
I guess
but
more like covered patio versus like a
it's a covered-
sunroom being
It's a
added to
covered
a house.
structure. It doesn't matter to us what's inside of it.
Yep. And it's permitted and has to pass, it's already in the permit process, so it has to pass electrical, whatever.
Correct.
All that's already
Yeah.
part of the
How-
process.
How it's tied into the roof, all of that will or has been inspected.
Okay.
Do we have a motion? Go ahead.
Do you,
Make your first motion. Go ahead.
okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm motioning this correctly. It's for a 7-foot,
7.5.
7.5 foot variance.
Yes.
Okay, so I motion
Sorry.
we,
Can we specify where, please?
Talking about the rear setback? The rears, he's talking about 7.5 foot from the rear front setback is what he's saying.
okay.
The rear front.
Rear front, yes.
For this particular structure.
For this, yeah.
What are we calling it? A covered
Covered deck.
deck?
Covered deck is what it's permitted as.
Now I just forgot what I was going to say.
7.5 foot.
7.5 foot rear setback.
Front setback.
Rear front
Rear
setback.
front setback. Okay. Motion to approve the 7.5 foot rear front setback on the deck structure.
Yeah, on the covered patio
Covered
structure. Yeah,
structure.
perfect.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion to approve 7.5 foot variance on the rear front setback for the covered deck. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, no opposition, the motion's passed. Thank you, Mr. Morales. Obviously, you did. I didn't want you to have to come back and deal with this again, so.
I appreciate it.
No, nothing personal, but I won't see you again.
Same here.
Yeah. All right, the next item on our agenda is our new, number 4, new business, which is Ayman Nashed.
Yep, this is the last variance request for tonight. It is for a 21-foot front setback variance to place a detached carport in the front and setback in front of the principal structure. Property is zoned R3 and is just over 15,000 square feet in size. Minimum front yard setback requirements in this district is 35 feet for any structure. In 2014, this property received BZA approval for a front setback variance of 5 feet, which would allow for a 30-foot front setback. This request is to place the carport approximately 9 feet off of the front setback. If approved, the structure would be roughly 23 feet from the edge of pavement on Branford Drive. There are several utility easements present on this property which cannot be built upon. The structure is 20 foot by 20 foot in size, 400 square feet, and is located in the driveway in front of the residence. Section 7.080D of the zoning ordinance, detail requirements for variances not involving special flood hazard areas. These are detailed below. Section 7.080 of the municipal zoning ordinance lists general requirements for a zoning variance request. Those requirements and staff findings are as follows. The board shall not grant a variance unless it makes a finding based upon evidence presented as follows. The particular physical surroundings, shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved that would result in a particular hardship upon the owner as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict application of the ordinance were carried out must be stated. Staff finds that the property does have a unique shape in addition to the utility easements present on the property. The conditions upon which a petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same district. Easements found in other residential lots will typically have one utility line or drainage easement, whereas this lot has 3 distinct utility lines and easements. The variance will not authorize activities in a zone district other than those permitted by this ordinance. Detached structures are allowed by right within the R3 zoning district, but are to adhere to applicable front setbacks of the principal structure. Financial returns only shall not be considered as a basis for granting a variance. The property owner has not identified financial returns as a reason for this request. The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property after the effective date of this ordinance. The creation of the house and the lot shape were not completed by the applicant. However, the structure was placed by the applicant without obtaining a building permit. That granting the variance request will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by the ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Staff finds that the variance requested could potentially provide the applicant with special privileges denied by the ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings within this district with a structure located in the front yard setback. The variance is the minimum that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Staff finds that the requested variance may not be the minimum to make the reasonable use of the structure for the proposed use due to the ability to relocate the carport on the property to meet setback requirements and remain outside of any easements. The granting of the variance will not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the area. The staff finds that the variance should not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property improvements in the area. The proposed variance will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, substantially increase the congestion in public streets, increase the danger of fire, endanger public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values. Staff finds that the variance may not have any of the above effects. Number 10 is not applicable in this case. And in conclusion, staff finds that this property does have a unique circumstance in regards to shape, utilities, and easements located on the property. The lot has already previously been granted a 5-foot variance in 2014 to have a lesser setback requirement than is allowed on any R3 lot today. The carport can be relocated on site to meet setback requirements, and had a permit been applied for through codes, this would have been noticed at that time. If approved, the applicant will be required to obtain a building permit for the structure. There's a couple for this. In addition to the utility easements on the property, it's quite hilly, if you will. Not necessarily hilly, but there's some slopes on the site.
Undulations.
Thank you. So this is basically, we're walking from the corner of the lot along the front of the property, kind of making way across the entire lot with the sequence here. So it's a little tough to tell here in the picture, but you do have a little slope right here on the property. And this is taken head on, so you can kind of see where that slope is located at.
Is that part of the drainage easement?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
So we do have this is where the carport is at currently. And then this is taken from the opposite side of the property looking towards the carport. And then this is a overhead image, so try my best to get it lined up properly. This is pretty much as close as I can get it. So it's going to be close generally, not 100% accurate, but it's going to be pretty close. So what we're looking at here, these green lines are sewer lines, sewer mains. These these dashed lines, if you will, that is the easement location for the utilities, and so nothing can be built within that area on the property. So you have a line running along the back of the property, and it kind of continues this way. Then you have really they all come together right here, and it branches off. So that's what is creating this unique shape. Right here is where you have the carport in question. So it's tough to tell based on the aerial imaging, based on the contour lines that we have available to us. Kind of right here in this vicinity is where I would say approximately that swell area is the topography variation is located at. Nothing says it can build up an area around that for the carport if the carport were to be shifted to the side. I know it's not probably desired by the applicant to have it located in that area just because of where the driveway is located today. But that is the analysis I have on this lot.
So when you said that it could be repositioned and meet setbacks, that's what you're suggesting, is that it could be pushed around to the side of the house there,
Correct.
and that there is enough room basically to the right of the house as you're facing it, to stay out of the easements and stay out of the setbacks.
Yeah, so taking this, so this is a 20 by 20 square foot structure right here. It's to scale. So if you can take that and you can rotate it and shift it to the other side of the house, right here, if you did that, I know it'd be a little bit more difficult with the sloping out there on the property, but can it be done? Yes.
Okay, and then one more question I have is, when does a carport become a garage? Because it looks like it was closed in, the only thing it's missing is garage doors. If it was a garage, it would require a whole different set of codes, I guess, inspections. So when does a carport become a garage or vice versa?
I'm not sure if Mr. Blair would have any additional information
I was
on that
looking
as
at it,
far
but
as
he
code
wasn't
requirements.
motioning.
I'm really not aware of this building, so
Okay,
I would have to get back with you.
Yeah.
because that's my only concern is that, I mean, just personally, I built a 600 square foot garage at my house, and I had to have footer inspections, electrical inspections, I had to have several inspections. A carport with walls on it doesn't go through those same levels. And I'm just, when does it become a garage? If I'd known I could do that, I probably wouldn't have done the other. So that's why I'm asking, when does it become a garage?
So-
And honestly, my point is also, if there was if the board so chose to say, you know, hey, this can be moved around to the side, and we tell him that, I don't want him back in here because now he's moved a garage to the side, and now he's got to go through a whole nother set of inspections,
So
right?
as far as planning department is concerned, planning codes have different views on this. The way planning is looking at this is it's a covered structure. What it is really.
Doesn't matter whether it's a car.
It's just like last request, we don't care if it's a sunroom, we don't care if it's a
Okay.
covered deck.
I got
So
you.
what the code requirements are gonna be completely different from the way that we're viewing it tonight. He'd be required as far as permitting purposes to go through the proper channels as far as that's concerned.
Okay. All right. Any more questions for Mitch?
So when you mentioned a moment ago, when we were looking at this one to scale drawing, potentially moving it to the side of the house, if you'll go back to that next picture, or the other one. So would it require removing the front part of the fence for it to be kind of located within that fence area?
I think,
Would
yeah, I
that-
think
is
it would
that
have to be. And it also, it noticed from the aerial view that it looks like the AC units are on that side of the house as well.
That's what it looks like, yes.
So there would have to be some enough room as well for that. And, yeah, I'm not 100% sure based on that picture with the swale, I think you're right, there may have to be some buildup or something there for that to work, but if that buildup is not in the encroachment of the easements, then it's still possible and allowed. It's just whether or not, it looks like there's enough space there. But,
I was able to manipulate it and kind of shift it around the site, make sure it fit. Yep.
and then honestly, it looks like he could even be wider than 20 feet. If he was on the side, it could be, to allow for that, the AC units and stuff. It looks like there's even more space. Yeah, I obviously don't have complete drawings, but it looks like it. Okay, anything else? All right, at this time, I'll suspend the Board of Zoning Appeals and open a public hearing for anyone who would like to speak for or against this request. I don't know if you'd like to speak or not, if you would. If you would, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Davis. I'm his brother.
Huh?
There is no space to put in the site. There is only 10 feet, and there is a two air condition.
So you're saying from the house to
Yeah.
what, to the swale, to where it goes
Yeah,
down?
if we try to move it in the side of the building, there is two air condition, and there is 5 feet, and there is a hill.
So you're saying that you couldn't put it there without modifying the ground? You'd have to
Yeah.
build it up, right? But,
Thank you.
but Mitch, I think you're saying there's at least 20 feet between the house and that easement, right?
Yeah, between the easement that's present on the recorded plat, yes, there's ample space for that. Now, what's required to manipulate the
Right.
ground, maybe something that has to go through Public Works as well as far as drainage. That is not showing as a drainage easement on the plat. So what that is actually for, that's a question for Public Works.
So it's some sort of public works easement, but we don't know what it is.
If it's not even an easement because it's not on the plat. We only have utility easements on the plat. I'm not smart enough to know what the Public Works world would deem that, so.
Okay. All right.
My name is Dennis Blair. I'm the interim building official for the town of Smyrna. Of course, we didn't know about this building, so it could be just a lightweight structure, but it could possibly be required to have a slab for it to sit on. So until we see
Right.
the process of his building, we didn't have any information on it. So I'm going to, at this point, assume that it's just a lightweight metal building that doesn't have a lot of restrictions as far as structurally.
Footers and.
Yeah, the
okay.
footing may or may not be required for this.
Oh, gotcha, okay. But I guess we would suggest if he was to relocate it beside the house, that he contact Coast Department and have all the appropriate permits, et cetera, right?
This is another situation where a permit is required,
Yeah,
and we would know about this in the front.
yeah, and so this one was not permitted when it was built. And even though, whether it's a lightweight structure or not, a permit's still required, because it is a
Over
covered
100
structure,
square
right?
feet, Yep.
Okay. Anyone else who'd like to speak for or against this request? Not seeing anyone, we will close the public hearing and reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I think, there's a couple of things here. The lot is a little odd in size. There is some variations in easements and right-of-ways or whatever that's there. It does have two front street setbacks, which really aren't a factor in this case on the other side. So there is potential for some hardship there. I guess the question is could the building be moved onto the lot and not require any variance? And from an overhead plat, it looks like it probably could. Based on the undulations and stuff, I don't know how much work that might take, but it does look like it's possible. So that's kind of what we have. I can tell you, this is another front setback, and we usually are very stringent on front setbacks for a reason.
Like an hour.
Yeah, and the community in general likes that 35-foot setback, right? That's why we require it on all new buildings, all new subdivisions. And I do believe if this had been permitted or supplied, it would not have been approved the way it is. He would have been told that he's got to have some variances or move it. But wishes of the board.
The motion has no, if it were to be denied, the motion has nothing needs to be stated that you could do something else with
No.
it. We're just denying where it is
That's
now. And
exactly
it.
right.
Just want to clarify that.
And then
Yeah.
they can deal directly with it.
Then they can start the process over if they want to.
Yep.
We also need to put a time frame again though on,
I would
If we were to
agree.
do that.
yeah.
I would just,
Would we even need to add, if we denied due to lack of permits as well, or does that even at this point come into play? Do we
No.
care?
No.
We just lack of hardship
Yep.
and,
yep, yeah, permit's not a factor. That's not why we would pass or deny.
I guess my other question would be, as far for Jason, do we need to, if we deny and we put the time constraint on when they need to take it down, do we need to open again, like we did with the gentleman earlier at the fence, to kind of let him say how long, or
Yeah,
should we
you,
just
I
pick?
think it's, yeah, certainly, I think if the board would like to get the applicant's input on a time frame in which he could, it's reasonable for him to get it down, I think that would be a fair thing to do.
Okay. Based on that discussion, I will suspend the Board of Zoning Appeals and reopen a public hearing and ask Mr. Nashed or his brother to come back to the podium, please. Yeah, just, the discussion we wanted to have is if the decision is made by the board to deny this and ask you to relocate it, or instruct you that it would need to be relocated to be kept, how much time frame do you feel it would take you to be able to do that?
Can
30
you-
days, 60 days?
Can you تقدر to move it?
It's too hard. It's gonna cost a lot of money to
Yeah.
relocate it because
I-
it's downhill.
Yeah,
It's kind of too
I
hard.
understand that, but that's unfortunately not necessarily a factor for the time to remove it. So I understand that, but that's not really what I'm asking.
Can you?
If it's denied, how long do you need to remove it?
60 days.
How much the maximum?
You can make whatever request you want. We may not give it to you. You can ask for 10 years, we're not gonna give you that, yeah.
Okay, 90 days. Good.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for either?
No.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll suspend the public hearing, reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals for a motion and discussion. I guess that, the factor is, the applicant stated several times, it's gonna take quite a bit to level the ground to make it buildable beside the house. Based on the overhead plat, it looks like it's possible. A factor of cost is not something that we can consider. That doesn't play into it. It specifically says that financial returns or costs can't be a factor. So, that's kind of where we are. It's whether or not you feel there's enough of a hardship to approve this front setback or not.
I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to deny due to lack of hardship, and also add that we would like to give them 90 days to be able to take the structure down.
I think I would like to ask you to restate that.
Okay.
Not for lack of hardship, there's plenty of hardships, but I think it's because the building can be positioned in a way that doesn't require variances.
So I withdraw my original motion and would like to make a new motion to deny based on the building would be able to be relocated to fit within our rules, and also add that we give the owner 90 days to be able to take the structure down.
Perfect. Jason, we okay there?
Yeah, and you could add or to relocate in consultation with Building and Codes Department.
Within that
you could kind
timeframe.
of keep it broad if you wanted to in that way.
Okay.
If you thought that was the prudent thing to do. So just another idea there.
All right, we've got a motion to deny the request due to the capabilities of the lot, of the building being able to be repositioned on the lot and not require a variance. Do we have a second? Oh, and 90 days to remove it.
Or reposition.
are you you're modifying?
Yes,
your
I'd like to
amendment?
modify
Okay.
to also add.
So we have a motion to deny the request based on the ability to relocate the building in another fashion on the property, allow 90 days to remove the building, and that the applicant could proceed with following appropriate codes requirements of possibly relocating on the lot. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'm not going to repeat it. We have a second. All those in favor of denial, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is denied. Mr. Nashed, I would encourage you to work with codes on possibly relocating it. Make sure that you're following that process so that you don't get drugged back in here again. So appreciate you. Next item on our agenda is staff comments or other business. Do we have any?
I think you've heard enough from me tonight.
Yeah. All right. In that case, we will stand adjourned. Thank you. And Mr. Morales, we didn't mention it. We didn't put it, it's not necessarily part of our motion, but you need to know that the building was approved as a storage building. If you decide to ever make that a living quarters of any kind, you would have, there is a process that you would need to come back and get permission for that. So before you move anybody in there or add an air conditioner or anything, check with codes and planning to make sure you're compliant.
We'll do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we would have put it in our